We have an outstanding person with us today, Lauren Kuby, and I have to read some of her accomplishments here. There's so many that I can't memorize them, so I have to read them, so you gotta pardon me. Here we go. Lauren Kuby was elected to the Tempe City Council on a sustainability platform in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. She's an advocate for worker protections, equity, and climate change. Lauren champions cities as incubators of innovation. Journalist Juan Gonzalez featured Lauren in his book, Reclaiming Gotham, as evidence of cities taking action and challenging legislative interference in local democracies. Lauren has led Tempe's efforts for social, economic, and environmental justice, including equal pay, earned sick days, climate action, affordable housing, animal welfare, urban forestry, transparency, and campaign finance reform. She spearheaded a dark money amendment, garnering 91.44% voter support. It's pretty high. For her efforts exposing corrupt money and politics, Lauren was featured in the MSNBC docuseries American Swamp. Other than that, she hasn't done much. So Nancy Anneker wants to add something. Nancy Anneker wants to add something.
I just want to say how happy I am to have Lauren here. I've known Lauren for a long time, and I'm so proud of her, and so proud that she's doing this today. I think you're really going to enjoy hearing what she has to say. And I also wanted to welcome my sister from Amherst, Massachusetts, and my brother from Tempe that are joining us. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And now here we are. We're privileged to have Lauren. So Lauren, take it on.
Thanks so much for having me. And Nancy, thanks so much for inviting me. And thanks for staying involved in Arizona politics. You're quite a force of nature, and glad to have you still engaged.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd give you a little bit of background about myself. I want to talk about climate, and I want to talk about Arizona, but I'm a politician. I'm going to talk about myself too. But I wanted to let you know that I got started in politics back in 1958 when I was a baby, and JFK, that's not me there, but he's holding a generic baby. But JFK surprised my parents in the little town of Holbrook, Massachusetts. And they were volunteering for him in his Senate race, and he just showed up without any entourage. And my parents were so startled, and my dad immediately offered to go make coffee. Yet there was no coffee shop. You had to run home and make it in a percolator. And we know how long percolators take. So my mom was alone with JFK for about 45 minutes. And this was like a very important moment in her life, but it was in my life because it really imprinted upon me. And it also was a staple for a lot of jokes in my family because my sister was born 9 months later. And she had red hair, so we'd always joke that somehow something had happened, and she'd always get really offended because she loved the Kennedys so much. But JFK was a big influence in my life, and he asked to hold me while he was waiting for the coffee, and he said he missed his daughter Caroline so much. And my mother and he had this wonderful conversation, and it deeply impacted me in my life. And I became a Girl Scout. I remember when I was a Girl Scout in 6th grade, I was in an argument with my 6th grade teacher, who insisted somehow that if you dropped a bale of dust from a helicopter, it would spread equally around the world. And I wasn't an environmental scientist then, but something just struck me as really wrong about that statement. I kept fighting it. And he just said, "That's it. You have to go down to the principal's office because you won't stop arguing with me." And I remember raising my hand and yelling, "Attica, Attica." And I had all the students like clapping and chanting with me. And I thought, this is fun. Like, I like organizing. But when I was a student, I was an anti-war activist when I was a young person. And I got deeply involved in George McGovern's presidential campaign in 1972 and was the Suffolk County Long Island coordinator for George McGovern for young people. And that was also a big influence in my life. So to go from Kennedy to Barack Obama, I did Camp Obama training. I was deeply inspired by Barack Obama and was part of the original group Arizonans for Obama, and helped to organize a lot in the state. And that really inspired me to run too. Also, the fact that Sarah Palin could be a vice presidential candidate, I thought like, hey, I can run. So I heard his State of the Union speech in 2014, and he talked about how cities are leading, that when we have government in a gridlock, federal government in a gridlock, and we have states perhaps moving forward or maybe moving backwards, especially in the areas of environmental protections, that cities have to stand up and lead. So I decided, hey, I'm an environmentalist, I'm a sustainability scientist at ASU, and I know how to win. I've run so many different campaigns for legislators and for other city council members. Maybe I should run. Maybe I should even employ my dog, my grand dog there, Raja, to help me. I use my dogs as props, as Susan and Nancy will tell you. So I knocked on 14,000 doors in the city of Tempe, and I won. I was the top vote getter, and I ran with my buddy. You may know David Shapiro. He ran for superintendent of public instruction a few years back. So he and I ran, and it was kind of a little bit of a toppling of the status quo in Tempe, I think you'd say. So I got elected in 2014 at the age of 56, and I had never run for office, but I had high hopes to lead our city in sustainability. We had the nation's most innovative university, Arizona State University. Some people call it Arizona's Sustainability University, but we had high hopes to really change the trajectory and create the most sustainable city, if not in America, then at least in Arizona. So, I ran based on a sustainability platform, and I ran to solarize the city. I wanted to see the adoption of rooftop solar to a 100% renewable energy goal to really make a difference in our city and show that cities could do this and be a model for other cities. Not so fast, not so fast. We had SRP, Salt River Project, and APS that enacted laws to really restrict net metering. We can talk about that in more detail later, but it suddenly was not very cost effective, shall we say, for residents to put solar on their homes. You could do it and be a good person, but you wouldn't necessarily save the money that you should be saving had they not enacted these rules. So that was like a kick in the gut. So I started to look at other directions. I mean, obviously solar for our own government operations, but started to look at other sustainability initiatives. And I naively thought, well, how about plastic bags? Because single-use plastic is such a blight on the environment, and it costs cities, in the case of Tempe, a couple $100,000 a year to deal with the blight and to deal with the impacts on recycling. So why don't we put a ban on single-use plastic? And why don't we make it beneficial for businesses and actually give them 10 cents a bag, allow them to charge 10 cents a bag instead of them losing 2 cents a bag by having plastic bags. That resulted in a big outcry from the legislature, and they actually banned plastic bag bans, which is kind of absurd on the face of it, because you see all across the country where there are single-use plastic bag bans. There's a bit of a kerfuffle. People wonder what they're going to do with their dog waste and such. And then people realize, well, plastic's everywhere. Plastic comes to you. It's kind of like pizza. It's always there. And to just put a ban on plastic bags, it ends up reducing plastic, single-use plastic in the waste stream by up to 80%. So that was a disappointment, and there was a lawsuit, and I won't go into all that detail, but to say that that law is still in the books, and we have high hopes for repealing it someday when the Democrats take over the legislature. They also did, though, a ban on energy benchmarking. And, when you try to lose weight, you want to measure, you want to kind of record what you eat when you lose weight, and that's how you kind of see what you eat. You're more conscious of what you eat and you lose weight. Well, the same thing with energy use. If you start to record it, you start to measure it, it's way easier to see what impacts different processes or initiatives or programs have on energy use. So by banning energy benchmarking for cities, they really took away a tool that cities had to really help businesses to reduce their energy use. That was an absurd law that is also still in the books. You saw that there's a quote in my bio, but I was really proud to be part of this book and mentioned in the same breath with Gregory Cesar, because he in Austin, Texas, and then myself in Tempe were really challenging a lot of this interference in local democracies at the state level. And we mentioned that, the American Swamp and Katie Torr and Jacob Soboroff, they highlighted how Tempe, with our ballot initiative, is taking on dark money. And this relates directly to preemption, because so much about preemption, state preemption, and legislative interference in our democracies is about corporate special interests running the show, right? Just handing over legislation that representatives or state senators will carry forward, and they take the money from those donors and they carry forward their legislation. So I was trying to, on a national level, talk about how dark money influences elections and how by spending money in elections, they impact elections. And I gave as an example Sandra Kennedy's race in 2014, where $9 million was spent against her by Pinnacle West and APS to defeat her. So there was a case of the regulated interfering the elections of the regulators. So that was pretty damaging to our body politic. And I wanted to make people aware of that on a national level. Getting back to Tempe, I'll go through this kind of quickly, but I really turned efforts inward and tried to create a more sustainable city by first adopting a sustainability commission. And we had 11 representatives from across the city. We had students, high school teachers, we had professors, we had residents and business advocates, a group of people who really wanted to advance our sustainability goals. And we had Braden Kay, our sustainability director. He was the first graduate, one of the first graduates of the School of Sustainability at ASU, where I also work. So we've been able to really take a program that was focused on, waste, water, energy, recycling, and really advance what was missing, I thought, in our sustainability program, which was equity, the idea of equity. So when you look at Sustainable Tempe and how we've changed the corporate culture of our city, and we've been able to have people and the organization that is our city and our residents see sustainability in a much broader way, not just as waste, water, energy, but as an equity building program to create equity in our system. So you see this cartoon about the difference between equality and equity. And on the first image, we have the young people looking at a soccer match, and they all have equal access to that soccer match, but it's obviously not equitable. So if you give somebody a leg up and the person that's handicapped gets to get on a ramp, they can actually have an equitable experience as opposed to an equal experience. So Tempe is trying to move the needle so we can see all of our efforts in the context of equity. So we're only the second city in the state to adopt a climate action plan, Flagstaff being the first. And in fact, we're adopting Climate Action Plan 2.0 this year that's focused mostly on equity issues. And our climate action plan, we're trying to tackle extreme heat. I know Nancy knows about extreme heat in Seattle these days. And I won't read through all the litany of initiatives, but extreme heat, transportation, and energy efficiency are amongst the initiatives that we're stressing and trying to really enact policies and initiatives that will tackle these issues. And one example is, urban forestry. We're trying to double our shade in Tempe from 13% shade canopy to 26. And that will have great impact on transportation, for example, because when you want to get a bus, you don't want to wait in the sun. So if it's a shaded bus stop, you're much more likely to take transit. So that's just an example of how, all the interconnectedness of all of the initiatives that we're putting forward. So back to the state of preemption in Arizona, we are kind of the poster child for preemption. I'm kind of the poster woman for preemption in the state. We also have national preemption, right? So we saw this during the Trump administration, when the Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Accords and our commitments to reduce our carbon emissions. The cities, I'm very proud to say, and Tempe was one of those cities, Phoenix and Tucson or two of those other cities, we adopted the moniker, we are still in. We realized that if we are 70% of the problem, if cities create 70% of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, that we should be 70% of the solution. So we stepped up with universities and mayors and governors and business leaders to declare that we are committed to meet the Paris Agreement and the Paris Climate Accords. So I mentioned before about state preemption and corporate interest driving a lot of that local interference in our democracies. And you've all probably heard of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Well, they're corporate lobbyists, and they write and they push this legislation not just in Arizona, but in state houses across the country. And these initiatives are focused on every aspect of governing, from tax policy to environmental policy to cigarettes and tobacco legislation. So, and they're increasingly working on trying to roll back climate change solutions that cities and states and federal government are trying to enact. So anybody who's in this climate world will tell you really have less than 10 years to solve our climate issues and our problem. We need to act aggressively. We are in a climate crisis. We are in an emergency. What gives me hope? Here's an example of what gives me hope. This is an event that I ran at ASU where I'm a sustainability scientist. And we had 235 middle school and high school students from all across Arizona. 52 separate schools and middle schools were represented. And they did a whole sustainability summit to try and understand how they could affect change at their city level and at the state level to enact change that would change the world, in fact. And the Arizona Youth Climate Coalition, these students are remarkable. You probably heard of Greta Thunberg from Sweden. Well, we have our own Brian Messinas in the middle, who's sitting there who's there with the lanyard, wearing the sweatshirt. We have so many amazing activists in Arizona leading the way. Here's a picture of Brian as well. And he's brought attention to the influence, too, of the fossil fuel industry and utilities in our electoral politics, and not just in the Corporation Commission race, which I mentioned before, and I'll talk about a little bit later, but across the state, and that most legislators, even Democrats, take money from APS and take money from utilities. And I think this impacts the way that they think about the climate. To me, climate is the great convener. When we've done polling, and a lot of environmental groups have done polling in the Southwest, there's intense interest in climate change solutions, but we don't necessarily see that reflected in the politics of our council members and our legislators, and certainly our governor. So here's some other people that inspire me. You might recognize Anna Tovar in the upper left corner. She is the newest member of the Arizona Corporation Commission. She was a former mayor of Tolleson. You see Kate Gallego there on the bottom left, who's the mayor of Phoenix, who's made climate her priority. In the salmon-colored suit, you see the wonderful Regina Romero, who I know you all know, and her Million Trees initiative in Tucson is changing Tucson and will be the signature initiative that I think people will be talking about in 20 years when they think about Regina Romero and her leadership. And I won't go into everyone there, but there are a lot of women. Interestingly, there are a lot of women there who see climate as one of their number one foci in all of their public policy and all of their work. So let's talk about the Arizona Corporation Commission. Now, I see a typo there, and that's very painful to me, you guys, because I'm an editor by training, but the Arizona Corporation Commission is often thought of as the fourth branch of government. So it was established way back in 1912 by the Arizona Constitution, and we're only one of 7 states that have a commission. We're only one of 7 states that has a commission that is elected. We're one of 13 states that has, we have one of 13 states that's elected, not appointed. And one of 7, I'm not really sure. This is the first time I'm presenting on this, so excuse me, I don't have it written out. So we'll forget that. But we're elected, not appointed by the legislature or the governor, and that's really very important to creating clean energy rules and to protecting consumers related to energy rates. So the Arizona Corporation Commission regulates the public utilities, and by public utilities I mean private monopolies that have distribute water and energy to our state. The original drafters of the Arizona Constitution wanted to make sure that they were elected and not appointed because they feared that utilities might exert undue influence over a governor or over a legislator. So they were very prescient in establishing that structure. The Corporation Commission has legislative and judicial roles, so it's very unusual in our Arizona government, but very crucial to so many aspects of climate, as I'll be telling you. So there's been a lot of challenges to the Arizona Corporation Commission Authority in recent years. Back in 2011, the Goldwater Institute, many of you have heard of the Goldwater Institute, but they challenged the authority of the Arizona Corporation Commission. And there was an important ruling by the state the appeals court that said the legislature lacks the power to decrease the commission's constitutional authority. But that has not stopped the legislature from trying to kneecap and freeze the commission's regulatory authority. And let's see. They recently tried to pass a law that would take away the legislative authority of the Corporation Commission to enact energy rules. And this is a very dangerous move. Luckily, it did not pass. It was opposed by a broad-based coalition of businesses, even utilities and energy providers, clean energy providers. There's another typo. Oh, this is painful. Susan William, you know how painful this is to me to see typo. Sorry, folks. So it is the fourth branch of government, but it's often ignored, right? So it's down ballot. You see the governor's race, you see the attorney general, you see the superintendent of public instruction, and you may not see, and the secretary of state, but you may not see corporation commission, but it's such an essential role that is played in our state. Recently, the Arizona Corporation Commission advanced new clean energy rules, and this was an incredible breakthrough. Maybe not enough, I would agree it's not enough, but Anna Tovar and Sandra Kennedy have been working on this for years. Actually, Sandra Kennedy had been working on it for decades. And Anna Tovar, as our latest corporation commissioner, worked with Commissioner O'Connor, who was a Republican, who was a climate change denier. And they were enabled recently at the end of May to enact these new energy rules. They still have to go through some rulemaking processes, but every indication is they will be passed. But this creates 100% carbon-free emissions by 2070 in Arizona. And you see that the schedule will be 50% by 2032. Now, I'd like to be 100% by 2032, but all in good time. You know, we need to change maybe the makeup of the Corporation Commission. But by all analyses, this was a really important step forward for clean energy rules in our state. And let's see. Now, it's a little early to talk about this, and I'm hoping to make an announcement coming up in August, but I have every intention of running with Sandra Kennedy for Corporation Commission. Sandra is an icon to me. I have long admired her, and she has been a mentor to me. When I was first running for office, I remember her showing up at phone banks for me, and just that kind of attention to detail of someone so big and so important in our body politic just touched me beyond imagination. I was so pleased to see her. We became fast friends. And right now in the 22 race, we have the opportunity to have a Democratic majority. We have 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans on the Corporation Commission. So in 2022, if Sandra Kennedy and should I run, I will be running, but we'll be able to turn that commission blue and really enact renewable energy rules and create a commission that's focused on consumer advocacy and trying to rid the Corporation Commission of undue influence from utilities. We'll be able to have such an impact on the state. So I've been tortured this decision because, as you can probably see from some of the presentation, I really love city politics. I think cities, are the percolators of progress. They're incubators of innovation. You can do so much at the city level and have such impact on people's lives. But when I think about the Corporation Commission, I think about how we could really spark a clean energy economy in our city and in our state. There I go. See, I'm focused on the city. But we could really spark a clean energy economy that have such impact on our working families. It has such impact on our environment and our state. So I'm going to be focusing, just as the American Job Plan do, my campaign on climate and care and jobs and justice, because all of those issues are interconnected. And in the state of Arizona, there's something called a just recovery that we must focus on as a commission and as a commissioner in the state of Arizona, because as we start to close down power plants, we closed down the Navajo generating station just a couple of years ago. We have to be aware that there are folks and a lot of Native Americans who rely on the coal economy for their living. So we must consider a just recovery, a just transition to enable those communities to have running water and power, which they don't. Only half of the Navajo reservation does. But we have to enable a transition to a clean energy economy that allows for people to find employment in the clean energy world. So I wanted not to bore you too long with like a PowerPoint. I really wanted to get to the questions, but I just want to encourage you to go to the Arizona Public article on Arizona's climate policy from hero to zero, because 15 years ago, when we had Janet Napolitano leading our state, we were considered leaders, not just in the Southwest, but in the country on energy policy. When we had Chris Mays as our commissioner, our lead commissioner for the Arizona Corporation Commission, she was considered the inventor of the renewable energy standard, right? And she created a 15% renewable energy standard for Arizona. And now we've fallen behind so much as a state, yet there is such economic benefit and potential if we do embrace the energy challenge that is before us. That's the end of my presentation. I'll stop screen sharing. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to come back and speak to you about my candidacy. I wish it could be now, but there's a lot to get in. I have to, there's a lot to get involved with running a clean elections campaign and getting your campaign all set. And the beginning of August is when I'll be able to collect, $5 contributions and get my signatures. And I sort of want to do it all at once. So you're the first LD that I'm speaking to, and I'm really honored to be here.
Okay, well, thank you. There's a lot of good information. Oh, Mike, you have a question right now.
Yes, I do. I'm waving my hand. I'm so excited. I'm like a little kid. You said some wonderful things. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You mentioned Napolitano and Chris May. I knew them, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. I worked with them a little bit, and I longed for those days and those ideas. You remind me a lot of those people and those leaders. So.
Hey, can I mention one thing? Did you know Chris Mays is running for Attorney General?
No.
He just announced.
Wow.
He just announced 3 or 4 days ago. Yeah, she is an amazing woman.
Oh, I was going to mention, over the years, one of my biggest concerns is how much money has gone from the utilities to kind of cheat and control the Arizona Commission. Your comments were right on. I wasn't aware of the new rules, and they're pretty dramatic. Do you think that is actually have a chance of happening?
Yeah, I mean, they worked for the new rules for a couple of years, and it was, about Leah Marquez Peterson. She had said she wanted them to be, standards, not goals, aspirational goals, but actual standards and rules. But she backed away from that in the very last minute. I hear rumors she may be running for Congress in Tucson, and I think she was thinking about the Koch brothers and not thinking about our working families. But they were able to do the first formal step to pass those rules, and they had to do some rulemaking procedures. But it was the leadership of Sandra Kennedy and also Ann Tovar that has brought this through. But you'd not believe it, but utilities actually wanted a more aggressive rule. They want more aggressive standards. So hopefully that will happen, and that if I'm elected, we'll be able to proceed and have more stringent standards, because I think we can do a little bit better than 2070.
Well, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, Pat, go ahead.
I guess it was 4 years ago. There was a man who had at one time been in charge of the Corporation Commission. His wife is a judge, and he ran this last time and didn't get it. And
Bill Mundell, yes, that was painful. Yeah, Bill ran the last 2 cycles and lost, and he was probably the most experienced candidate, and except for Sandra Kennedy in the first cycle. But yeah, it's deeply disappointing. I think on election night he'd won, and on both nights, and then when all the votes were tallied, he'd lost. And he served with Chris Mays, and he's considered the grandfather of the renewable energy standard. She's the grandma or their mother, so I don't think she wants to be called the mother of anything. But
yeah,
but Bill is like on my kitchen cabinet, and I get advice from him pretty much on a daily basis.
Oh, good, because he came down to Green Valley several times, and we had receptions for him. And Sandra Kennedy didn't have as much, notoriety or whatever you want to call it. She wasn't as well known down here as he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill is an amazing person, and it was deeply disappointing that he lost that race.
I know, all that experience. Yeah. That's
But
all.
when Sandra and I run together, we're really going to run like this. I think, the last election, they tried to run together, but, when you're running clean, you don't have a lot of money, right? In the primary, you have $123,000. So to maximize the efficient resource use, Sandra and I are going to run like this. So we're not going to have separate signs. We're not going to be doing separate things. It's always going to be Kennedy and Kuby, Kennedy and Kuby.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Questions? George, I know you had one, didn't you?
A question for you on the corporate commission, and I was curious statewide if you had any plans that would affect the equity for both the economy and social events. You talked about the tribes and some of the Navajo tribes in the north, but the Tohono Nation here in the south, in our area. Can you give us any information on equality and equity for some of the other areas in the state?
Sure, and I was referencing the just transition because our tribal nations have been really disproportionately affected and often supply the land for, say, a coal power plant, but they don't necessarily see the benefits even of getting water or getting electricity to those tribes. But, when you think about in northern Arizona, I know you mentioned southern, but you think about the Kayenta mine employing 500 people. When the coal mine shut down, that had a deep impact on the community. And as an environmental activist and someone who's concerned with equity, you can't just be concerned with the environmental impacts, you have to be concerned with the human impacts. That doesn't mean keeping alive the coal economy, because the coal economy the market is killing the coal economy. Solar is so much cheaper than coal, but we have to find ways to work with the tribes to bring clean energy to those tribes and to have those tribes serve as large-scale solar projects if they're so willing. Now, in the past, the tribes have not been so willing to have solar on land because land is a spiritual place. But there's recently, in the past few years, been sort of a break in that thinking and an understanding, a realization that it is better to adopt renewable energy and windmills and wind turbines and solar to benefit the nation, and there's other benefits that would accrue environmentally on a different kind of scale. So there's been kind of a logjam has been cleared, I should say. But we need to think about Nicole Horseherder from Dene Cares, an organization that brings together tribes on this issue, says utilities need to be able to, they must pay for the damage they've done to these tribal communities. You can find ways to enact policies that they'll bring forward a just transition, an investment in the tribal communities, investments that they want, that they direct, not that imposed upon them.
Lauren, what happened when they closed the Page power plant? What transition was there for the people that were benefiting from that? ASU has been working extensively in that area to bring power, renewable energy power projects there. There have been some efforts, some minimal efforts, but nothing in the scale that we need it. So there needs to be sort of statewide action, and obviously the legislature is not going to be acting upon this, despite the interest that we have in developing more sustained and clean energy infrastructure, right? So I'd say the effort's been minimal at best, and we really need to turn our attention to this idea of a just transition and community-centered infrastructure projects. Is that because they have no power, no money up there, so they're not going to benefit?
Partially, right, a little bit disenfranchised, and we seem not to go on a sidetrack here or a tangent, but we know some of the legislation about voting is tapping legislature would really impact tribal communities. So it's only going to get worse, if we don't fight a little bit to protect the democracies and the rights of Indigenous communities to actually vote.
Right.
But I'm proud of the university where I work, because there's been a lot of programs and projects and research has been happening in tribal communities with students working to create microgrids, for example, in tribal communities.
Lauren, the question that's always stuck in my mind is that I don't see people like yourself, activists, people in more or less in the public eye, tying fossil fuel profits to anti-climate change issues. They should be rolling off the tongue at the same time, and they're not. They're separate. You just don't ever hear that the reason why all the EPA regulations are were changed under Trump was because of protecting fossil fuel profits. You never heard that, and that should be said, just like the Republicans would say, "Crooked Hillary." You know, it should roll off the tongue. That kind of an issue should roll off the tongue of every politician, and really put it out there that that's what it's all about.
I just put up a post of a blog post I did years ago, but I was invited to an ALEC meeting when I first got into council, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and I used my own money, which kind of sickened me. I spent like $500 of my own money to attend this meeting, and because I wanted to go behind the scenes, like when I say the belly of the beast, and look at the influence of ALEC, which is primarily funded by the fossil fuel industry. And at that time, I was concerned about plastic bag legislation, but I learned so much about the wheelings and dealings of the fossil fuel industry and their impact on state legislators, and it's done through ALEC, right? No, it's profound, and as I was saying before, like climate is the great convener, and we have the American people, we have Arizonans on our side, like recognizing that we need to act, but the fossil fuel industry is so embedded in our legislature and in our state, in our federal government as well. And you've often heard probably people talk about that congressmen should wear logos of the corporations that fund them, and just be upfront about it, right? So that's one of the reasons why I'm running clean, is I just don't believe that. I believe public financing and I feel like dark money and money in politics is such a corruptive, corrosive influence, and nowhere is it more apparent than in the fossil fuel interests driving our climate policy, or lack of climate policy. So, I mean, when I was on MSNBC, APS and Pinnacle West were very angry with me and the city of Tempe, and they called and said, "Why is she talking about APS and our impact on the Corporation Commission race? Like, that is embarrassing, and she's talking about us in a national way." And I said, the city replied, said, "Well, did she tell any untruths? Like, was she factual?" And I said, well, yeah, it was true. She didn't say anything wrong, but she shouldn't be bringing attention to this. So I deeply believe we need to bring attention to this. I guess I'd say that APS, their corporate culture is changing a bit. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. They say they're not going to interfere in the election of regulators anymore. We'll see if that happens. But no, it's such a damaging. Fossil fuel industry is criminal in the impact that they've had on our body politic in our communities.
And they don't care. Yeah.
I don't as a consumer see the tie on a routine basis between fossil fuel profits and anti-climate concerns, and that's what my concern is. You don't see it routinely tied to the fossil fuel profits. It's just maybe it's supposed to be known, but it's not apparent to the average schmuck, in my opinion.
I know, like in the Corporation Commission, you need to be focused on consumer advocacy and rates and making sure the rates are fair. And I know that APS and Pinnacle West had record profits during COVID times, and none of those profits were sort of shared with the with the residents and the ratepayers. In fact, they're asking for another rate increase. And I mean, that's as direct a connection as you have. But I agree that we don't make that connection in the in people's minds as much.
Is it because people are scared of the fossil fuel industry and what they're going to do to them if they lay it right out there on a routine basis?
I'm not sure.
Michael, you want to unmute yourself?
Mickey.
Hello, Lauren.
Hey, Mickey.
Hey, as I see it, is this whole thing about the fossil fuel industry being such an important part of the consumers. We have to realize in Arizona, we don't produce much in the way of fossil fuels, except possibly some coal. But oil and gas, we are actually spending hundreds of millions of dollars for fossil fuels to power our vehicles and our electricity and sending it all to Texas. Isn't that something that the Corporation Commission could look into? Is how we can produce our own energy more here so we don't have to send all that money to Texas? Isn't that something that could get some bipartisan support?
Well, sure, and that's what the clean energy rules will spark within the utility industry. And I think you had mentioned about EVs and electric cars, did you? And that is a business opportunity for APS and Tucson Electric Power and SRP. And they are moving on that front because they realize that is a business opportunity that they must include in their way of thinking, And there's also on the federal front, the American Jobs Plan calls for a lot of investment in electric infrastructure for cars and for fleets. And I myself would also like to see, you call dockets of the Corporation Commission introducing into an initiative. I'd like to see us talk about hydrogen power too, because there are other states in California that are constructing a hydrogen infrastructure, and we're really behind the times, and we've kind of ignored hydrogen as a potential source of energy for not just utilities. I'm sorry, not just for creating electricity, but for powering automobiles and buses and such.
Well, in Europe, there are already trains and ships being built already or actually in service that are run on hydrogen. And the whole idea is, of course, the green hydrogen. But I think that's something with our solar power here in Arizona, I think that we have a huge potential here. But I hopefully you can help put things in that direction a little bit.
In Tempe, we're constructing a modern streetcar, and it was my earnest desire to see a hydrogen extended electric wireless streetcar system. We were the first in North America, in the Americas. And we even had Ernie Moniz, who was the Secretary of Energy at the time, say he would commit a cost share. He so wanted to see this happen. But we only got a wireless segment that was about 2 miles long. And it was a deep disappointment because the Holy Grail has been found. It's possible to have an electric battery-driven streetcar, wireless, that is hydrogen on top to extend the life of the electric batteries. But it'll happen in another city in the next 5 years or so. But I wish it could have been in Tempe, in Arizona.
Yeah, that would. Well, I appreciate the streetcar. Good idea.
George, do you have a question?
Just to follow up what Michael was talking about on the electric cars, the electric power stations, and gridding those along the interstate. You don't have any direct effect. Working with legislators, is there something that maybe be on the horizon where that could be implemented in going electric, setting up electric systems faster for electric cars?
Yeah, I think that's through the legislature and through ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation. And actually, my husband, Mike, who's a transportation geographer at ASU, this is his expertise and probably one of the world's experts on how to locate electric charging stations, both for fleets and for vehicles. And so he was starting to scratch at the door saying, wait, San Bernardino has a hydrogen system. Like, you're not telling the truth. In my kitchen cabinet, obviously. But there's great potential. And, that's what the American Jobs Plan, as Biden has designed it, is calling for, is an investment in the electrification of our country. I'm not sure if that's going to pass muster with this new plan that's being put forward, but I think it's essential because, you typically can't have those kind of large scale investments done by a city or a county or even a state. You need to bring in federal dollars, and I'm hopeful that we'll get some of that passed.
Matthew, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I'm referring back to what Phil said a little bit, but for me, the real question is, how are you going to get elected? Because, we have wonderfully qualified people who've run for office, and they've done it, without the big money, and they don't get anywhere. I mean, Kirsten Sinema knows how to get elected, and she works the system. But she's a huge disappointment for most of us. But how without the languaging, without getting the young people who you can get on board. I mean, my God, you're at ASU. This should be an underground organization of young people energizing these campaigns, because we don't have the money. We're not going to have the money. And unless we get the legislature elected, you can get on the corporation board. And if we still have a Republican legislature, they'll just take the power away from you. They'll figure out a way. So we need to get Democrats elected across the board. How are we going to do that?
How are we going to get the Corporation Commission to turn blue, or the
How are we going to get Democrats elected across the board?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the ideas that are going to get that done?
Yeah, well, when I think specifically about the CorpCom, it is down ballot. I think it's essential that we do civic education when we talk about the Corporation Commission race as candidates. We need to do a lot of civic education because once people understand the importance of the commission, they'll see the importance of voting down ballot, especially young people who are more attuned to the climate emergency and the climate crisis. And I haven't seen a Corporation Commission race where the two candidates ran together as a team. And I think that's essential. Sandra Kennedy's been elected now. She's going to run. It'll be the third time she's elected. She knows how to get elected in the state of Arizona. I have a lot of energy for energy issues, but I'm going to go to every place I can speak. I'm going to speak to the LDs at first, because that's my base, and I need your help to get the signatures. I need your help to get my $5 contributions. But I'm going to go to every country. I'm going to meet and go to every Indian community. I want to be out there as much as possible. And I think the people that know me know how hard I work. And I think it's important to embrace the youth movement, but also, we've seen the Next Gen Arizona, just an expansion of electoral infrastructure in the past 5 or 6 years. And my campaign manager is Zoe Stein, who was last with the OSSOF campaign, who created a community mobilization program that's being written about in academic articles because it was so successful. We're establishing trying to establish the whole infrastructure across the state now. So that's about me and CorpCom. But as far as turning Arizona blue, we've seen a lot of progress in the past few cycles. We saw actually a lot of progress with redistricting, and that enabled us to get closer to a majority. But sadly, we have a redistricting commission. It didn't go so well for us. So we have to get really involved in the redistricting process and be sure to call into those meetings and insist on, competitive districts and districts that aren't gerrymandered. I'm really worried about the redistricting process because that could really impact, the next 10, 12 years in Arizona. But the tide is shifting in some ways, but then we see how, extreme the Republicans and the Trump Republicans are in our state. Are the residents, are Arizonans going to turn away from that? Or are they going to embrace it more? I don't know. It's deeply alarming how radically right-wing some of our legislators are, and they don't seem to get punished at the ballot box. So I don't have any answer, but somebody who's worked in Arizona politics for 30 years nearly, I can never not have hope. We're all going to have to work our butts off to ensure that we can, in the midterm year, take advantage of the extremism and appeal to the independents and moderate Republicans to bring them to our side.
Mm-hmm.
Good answer. Thank you.
So, Phil, did you have another question?
I have 3 comments. One regarding hydrogen. Michigan state government has introduced part of their fleet to hydrogen power. So unless it's been taken away by the Republican legislature, they're involved in that you mentioned. In terms of the charging stations, because of the lack of charging stations, we did not buy a plug-in car. We bought a hybrid. But that being said, as soon as Biden's proposal to put 500,000 charging stations around the country in place, that's going to drive the whole industry. I mean, the industry is on the verge of taking off total electric, and you as well as I know about that.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, you talk about kids being involved and being young people and knowing what's going on. Well, the first thing that needs to be done is reintroduce as a requirement civics education, which in my opinion, it was a plot on the part of the Koch brothers and the people that want to reduce the size of government to dumb down the electorate. Okay, and by doing that, you don't provide them education on how the government works. And so that's all I really wanted to comment on. Thank you.
Isn't that a civic education amendment? Was that part of the budget negotiation?
I'm not sure. It sure would be a really big part of it. That's for sure.
Okay,
Yes.
Dean, you had a question. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to switch topics a little bit. We're in the midst of an extreme drought across the state, and I'm just wondering why there isn't more of an emphasis on water conservation. And I think the Corporation Commission could certainly force that issue.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I did not include that in my slides. And I was speaking to a policy advisor for Senator Kennedy, and she said more and more we're talking about water conservation as we regulate some of the private water utilities. So it's a really, really growing issue. I served on the AMWA board, Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, and cities in the past 10 years have really stepped up to enact more conservation measures as they realize like all their drought contingency plans were all like based on the same small resource, and we were all like relying upon that resource to get us all through. And so there's this principle of forbearance where we elected to pay more for our water in hopes to conserve more, and that ended up saving us money. But there's a whole drought contingency plan that was enacted like 2 years ago, and we're going to start to see some. It was an initial step forward, but we need to really seriously look at in the rural areas and in the farming communities and the agricultural districts, and really hold them to their conservation commitments that they made years ago, because they haven't necessarily followed through. And we have to look at it. We look at businesses that are springing up that are along the Verde River that are conserving water and producing beer, producing the barley because it's much less water intensive. And that's we should be encouraging businesses who take innovative approaches to water conservation and water use, and sort of hold those up as examples, and even incentivize those businesses, I think. But no, we're in for a whole lot of hurt. And as a city council member has to face water rate increases and the controversies that surround that, and we still have people in our city that they don't understand why, if they're using 170,000 gallons, they have to pay more per gallon for the 70,000 over 100,000. They don't understand why it isn't like gasoline, where they have to pay the same per gallon as a resident who uses 10,000 gallons. And we're the third cheapest water rates in the valley, and we have people complaining that our water rates are too high. And we do one-on-one consultations with residents who will sit in their kitchen, not since COVID maybe, but we'll give them advice about irrigating every zone in their property, and then even paying for their irrigation equipment and the irrigation controller. And we still have complaints that our water rates are too high. We'll actually start to think deeply about this.
Okay. I'm going to read a couple of chats here, if that's all right.
Sure.
It says, glad you're running for the commission. Had to write you in a few elections ago since too few Democrats are on the ballot. Thank you. Wonderful, Lauren. Well done and clear for a way forward. Now that every car company, we kind of covered this, I think, but now that every car company is building EVs, should the electric utilities in Arizona benefit a lot from powering vehicles? They should want to invest renewable sources, which have so much more potential here in Arizona. Those are some of the chats we got. And where are you, Lauren, where will you be campaigning in our area? When do you think that'll be?
So I'm planning to come down in August for a housing meeting. And so I need to get, I'm trying to line up and figure out, it's like a complex mathematical equation, like of where it can be and most efficiently. But I really do intend to get to every LD and in person. And, some counties don't have legislative districts, so I want to go to the counties as well. So I'll take my little Ford hybrid and travel around the state.
All over the state, even up at the northwest corner?
Yeah, I want to be like Beto O'Rourke,
Wow.
But I rely on you guys. Like, I really need your help for signatures and for the $5 contributions, because I don't think it's proper for regulators to run a campaign that relies on contributions, because you end up getting people contributing to you that you shouldn't have contributing to you. And I just think it's best that regulators who operate in judicial capacity run with clean elections financing.
George would say whatever we can do, right, George?
Yeah, let us know when you're down here. We'll open a door for you.
And wherever I go, I'm knocking. Wherever I knock a door, I'm knocking for Sandra. Whenever I'm talking to an LD, I'm talking about Sandra, because we're one for all, all for one.
Okay. Anything else, George, you want to say, or?
I think we had one more question, or two more questions. Bean, did you have another question follow up? Your hand was still up. No?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Okay. I think Matthew's got one last question.
Yeah, I'm glad Dean asked that question about water. And I would like to know why or how it is that you can have water pipelines be brought up as a subject to be considered, because I think it's being missed as an opportunity, like for instance where we have mines or other industry that use water, that it could be piped in from the ocean. I mean, desalinization using solar is a thing. And is there some possibility of working that into part of the campaign?
Yeah, possibly. I know there's researchers at ASU focused on desalinization, and there's been some success, I know, in Israel with that. Now I'm keenly interested in that. I wrote this proposal called the Decision Center for Desert City, DCDC. It's a Sustainable Water Management Research Center at ASU. And so all of that really interests me. There's so much work being done at U of A and at ASU that we just need to be embracing of that. And frankly, the CorpCom dockets have been rather conservative in nature, and I think we need to really look at more innovative management of water and energy in our state.
Yeah. Thank you.
All the while keeping it aware that we have to be consumer watchdogs, and we have to keep the rates as low as possible, and as equitable as possible. And I, for one, think, with water, and we're going to move in our city, I hope to do this, but the first 10,000 gallons should be essentially free. They should have a certain amount of water that's survival water. Yeah. That is not something that we should apportion according to income. And then the tiered system should go up beyond like the first 10,000 gallons, and beyond that, then you pay.
Matthew is our first chair from LD2, so I will pass your emails on to LD2 so they can invite you to their next meeting. Thank you, Matthew, for coming on.